Yeah.
Did you guys dug coal together?
I think digging coal and writing is very similar anyway. So,
Yeah, feels like you're on your own down the end of a shaft.
Exactly.
Welcome to the Two Authors Podcast, an entertaining chat show hosted by best-selling mystery and thriller authors Douglas Pratt and Nicholas Harvey, in lively, humorous and informative conversation with distinguished guests who share their thoughts and experience about forging a successful author career.
welcome to this week's show, brought to you as always by the fabulous, most bestest formatting solution in the world.
The bestest.
Vellum. I know, it's my writer side of me. I can make up words.
If you're powered by Vellum, you too can make up words.
You can make up words. And it's interesting. Like, we were just together kind of hanging out with some other authors.
How cool was that?
That was really
hanging
great.
out together. Yes.
It's always nice hanging out with you. You're the best. Like, we just hung out. It was great. We saw each other 2 weeks in a row, which is kind of unusual for us. Like,
I know. That was probably enough, actually. For you. I'm thinking for you. I'm sympathetic.
Oh, no, I was missing you already. I was like, So, guys, we got to hang out for a minute. I was on a cruise, stopped off in Grand Cayman, and we were going to do some diving, but the weather proved differently, so we ended up having...
Your big cruise ship dragged a vortex of shitty weather with it.
Real shitty weather. That's okay. Yeah, we still had a great lunch. We hung out. And then the very next week, we kind of hang out again at this little writing thing. And all this to be said, because that's a long story that I'm just going into. It's amazing to me. We hang out with these really high-powered authors, people that make us look really, really dumb, which doesn't take a lot. But,
I was going to say, that's every author pretty much.
But these guys are all almost to a T are using Vellum, which says a lot to me. Like, because I like to look at what successful people are doing and try to emulate them, because if I look at the people who aren't doing very well and emulate them, then that's just going to bring me down. But the very least you can do is look at what successful people are doing, and almost all of the ones I know are Vellum is definitely the way to go with it. They're almost all on there. So
that was a lot.
To me, says a
came
lot.
up multiple times in a few days that how it's a no-brainer. So that's a good social proof right there that Vellum is the best.
Yes, go with Vellum, bestest in the world. So. And also, big thank you to all of our Patreon supporters out there. You guys, if you guys are getting any kind of value from the show, you guys can always support us over at patreon.com/the Two Authors Podcast. And we have lots of cool extras in the free tier. And really, I get it. If you don't really want to drop the extra $3 a month, but you just kind of want to hang out, jump over on that free tier at patreon.com/the Two Authors Podcast. We got some cool stuff coming down the way, even for free people out there. But if you really like what you're getting here, it's $3 a month, and you get all these bonus questions and extras in there, and our full attention and love and devotion. So
absolutely. And that was another thing that came up in our little soiree we had the other week. Man, Patreon.
Yeah.
It's a neat alternative for authors to reach their followers and readers and what have you. We're very interactive. Yeah, really a lot of people going all in on their Patreons and doing some very, very, very cool stuff in there.
We talked to our good friend Willow Winters a couple months ago on here about what she's doing Patreon. There's so many people out there just really killing it on Patreon, doing better than our other good pickle friend, Dina Roy, my favorite pickle people. But she's doing so great on Patreon. It's a nice stopgap for people who are hybrid, who can't publish anything else. I'm doing short stories on mine. It's a lot of work to keep up.
Your author Patreon is insane. That you have so much content in there.
Yeah, but not compared to like what Dina's doing or Willow, it's like nothing. I've got to get
and Kelly, yeah.
Oh, and Kelly, yeah. We got so many people that are out there just really doing great on Patreon. So it's definitely a thing to work. We should, as we're sitting here arguing and advertising for Patreon, you guys jump on our Patreon. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Patreon, if you're listening to this show, drop the dime. Come on, man.
Yeah,
Let's go some sponsorship for the show.
Well, today, let's just chat about our guests real quick, because we've got some cool guests on. We have our good friend, also the co-host of the I Wish I Knew
Yesterday.
Yeah.
No, I Wish I Knew Tomorrow. No, that's not right. It's I Thought I Wish I Knew. No, that's not right. They have the best podcast out there.
It's Sara Rosette, and you know her well from our show. So, and also Jennifer Hilt, and together they co-wrote the fabulous nonfiction book, the Trope Thesaurus Mystery Thriller Edition, which is, I think it's book 5 in Jennifer's author resource guide about the Trope Thesaurus, which is really great. If you're trying to figure out what trope should I put into my books, it's such a cool thing. I've got a copy of it at home. Love it. It's great for just playing around with, looking at, trying to learn some new things. So let's welcome Sarah and Jennifer to the show. Welcome to the show. Jennifer, Sarah, so great to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here. Good to see you guys.
We're excited, of course. We're not that smart, so we need all the, anybody can come in with a thesaurus for us. It's going to be helpful. Cause
I feel intimidated. We've got two really smart people ganging up on us.
It's rough, but that's okay. We live with two smart people who gang up on us all the time. So
fair point.
Well, guys, just trying to start off right off. I know audience kind of knows Sarah, but Jennifer, you're kind of new to the show. But just give us a quick, brief overview of your background. So we'll start with Sarah because she'll be a little quicker, and then Jennifer kind of tell us a little bit about that. But then also, how did you guys kind of meet and this whole project come together?
Well, it's great to see you guys again and be back. Yeah, this project has been fun to do, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've been on before with Jamie. We did the cross-posted thing about the year in review kind of thing with y'all last time. And I write mysteries. I co-host the podcast with Jamie, the Wish I'd Known Them podcast. And yeah, live in Houston, empty nester, just trying, as we were talking about before we got started, just trying to spin all the plates for keeping the author career going. As far as how Jennifer and I met, we met on our podcast, and just connected and talked on the podcast. And I had always had this idea in the back of my mind to do a book about mystery tropes. And I just, never got around to it. That was one reason I started Mystery Books Podcast, which is a podcast for readers. I was like, I'll just keep track of these tropes, and then someday I'll pull them out and write about them. And I never did. And she mentioned she was going to do the mystery and thriller thesaurus. And I was like, I'll just send her an email and see if she wants, collab on that. And she did. And we just went from there. It was fantastic. Super easy.
Is that true, Jennifer? You can tell us the truth. We now need to know, is she really that easy to work with? Because Sarah's a troublemaker.
I know. Sarah's such a troublemaker. Yes, she's very awesome to work with and pretty much has ruined me from trying to do any other kind of collaboration. And I, for future things, I keep trying to think of, but Sarah, maybe you don't love that genre, but maybe you should just read it anyway, and so we can do a book together.
See, in fairness, I've ruined Nick for other collaborations, but only because he's like, I don't want to work with him again.
I'm never doing this thing again.
They might be worse than Doug, and that's entirely possible.
So I have a undergraduate degree in linguistics and a graduate degree in English literature. And I've always loved writing, and I wrote a whole bunch of romance novels. And even when I was doing my master's degree, I was really interested in popular novels, and which is always at that time in the 90s was not a popular, your English professors, they don't want to hear that you're reading a mystery thriller or anything like that. So I've always been curious, though, how those books work. So it was really kind of neat to come into, writing my own books, and then the indie world where you can study what you want and go down these rabbit holes. And I was helping people do some plotting of their books. So somebody has an idea, but they aren't really sure how to develop it. And so I was doing that in the early 2000s. And the trope book came around because we were using tropes to talk. You're talking about that character is the best friend of a brother or something like that. And the response I got at that time was writers really didn't want to use tropes. They thought they made them bad writers. They were hackneyed. They were taking shortcuts. And that made me really interested about, we need them to have a conversation as this common storytelling language, but yet people are feeling bad about it. And there's this value judgment. So I spent a lot of time during the pandemic doing just a ton of research, reading all kinds of books and watching all kinds of movies, and just recognizing, oh my God, there's tropes everywhere in everything. And it's just a matter of how you use it and what the genres are. So one of my favorite authors is Tana French, who writes, mysteries / psychological thrillers. And her books are chock full of tropes, but she's not the first person. If you think of Tana French, you don't think, oh, she's just written a book that she's jammed a bunch of tropes in there. And so when I started really looking and seeing them, I realized, there's so much that authors can do with them if they, kind of take the time to study and think of how they want to create their stories and create their characters. So anyway, that all led me to write the first Trope Thesaurus book, and that was more popular than I had ever envisioned. And so then I just kind of kept working on the other books because people would ask me, oh, well, what about this genre? So happily, Sarah was working with me on the last one, which was great. And we had a lot of fun. And we would have these great Zoom calls where we'd go down these rabbit holes of talking about our favorite series and shows and what we liked about them. So it was really just the most fun I've had writing a book.
Okay, so the first question we got to get out of the way here is, what is the difference between a trope and a cliche?
So to me, they're not the same thing. They get lumped together a lot, but I don't think they're the same thing. And the reason I don't think they're the same thing is this. I think that a cliche is something that's very fixed and is hard to manipulate into storytelling modules the same way a trope is. So when I think of a cliche, I think of something that has also a negative value to it. So cliches that I often like to mention are the dumb jock or like the dumb blonde. And you can write a story about a character who has cognitive, abilities, or they're not great at sports or something, but you don't have to like demean it in that way. So that's kind of just a way that I think of a trope as a thing that's easy to manipulate because you can add it to other things. Tropes play well with others. They're kind of like sticky in that way. You can have them work together well. Where it's much harder to do that with cliches, that they're just kind of, I tend to think of tropes as kind of like Play-Doh that's fresh out of the can. There's all these kind of fun things you can do with it. And I think of cliches as like the hardened bits that get stuck in your carpet that you step on that are really painful.
Legos.
So to me, that's kind of how I do that. That's how I kind of made that distinction. And I think it's really the negative value judgment about it, because that's really the kind of thing we want to steer away from. You can create terrifically awful antagonistic characters, but the cliched kind of like mustache twirling that we used to see, kind of more like if you look at movies in the 50s and things like that, isn't really something that our viewing audiences are into these days. They really want complex.
That's a shame. I really want a character that twirls his mustache in such a way, though. A little Boston Blackie thing that kind of spins.
I got to grow mine out. Get a big curl going on.
Get a curl on. We could be the mustache crew or like that, something like that. It'd be kind of cool.
There's a guy here on the island that runs restaurants. He actually runs some great places on the beach, and he has this moustache that curls right up almost to his ears, so it's got the full twizzle ability.
Cliche, that would be he's the bad guy of the whole island, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yes. He should be the bad guy, yes. Right. And Sarah and I have nothing to say about mustaches, so we know nothing about this.
Except Perot has one, that's all I know.
Perot has, yes, and he trusts, so that's cool. So why would you say tropes are especially important in mystery and thriller genres anyways? I mean, they're important for all genres, but since we're specifically talking mystery and thrillers. So.
Yeah, I feel like tropes give people something to hang on to. Like when you're first browsing a book and reading the description, maybe it gives you some ideas, high-level ideas of what the story might be about. And if you're into those things, you're like, oh, that sounds great. If a book description says this has a locked room mystery, I'm like, ooh, tell me more. I want to know more. There are just tropes that just draw people in. So I think that's important, but that's important in every genre. I think in mystery and thriller, especially in mystery, you've got some very specific things that readers want. And the tropes like the clues and the red herrings and things like that are essentially part of the structure of a mystery book. And so you've got to have those things. Otherwise, you don't really have a mystery if you don't have clues and red herrings and, false leads and things like that.
So I was just thinking about this. Are there some tropes that you feel should be like as you're describing that, you're reading a blurb, right? So you're reading a blurb and you want to see certain things in that blurb that's going to trigger you. Oh yeah, whether consciously or subconsciously, it should trigger you. So are there some tropes that should be absolutely out in the open and you should be talking about, and are there other tropes that you should be trying to slide in, under the radar a little bit? Like, we don't want to talk about this trope, but it's in there. Is there a difference between those two?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll let Jennifer speak to this too, but I feel like with mystery, sometimes the blurbs are really hard because you'll have this great twist, like maybe it's a hidden identity that you're, going to reveal halfway through the book, but you can't talk about that in the blurb because you give so much away. It can be really difficult. So what do you think, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think when we're talking mystery and thriller, the biggest kind of categories of tropes that Sarah and I go on and on about are scars and secrets. And there is so much you can mine with scars and secrets, and scars being like the things that happened, in the past to the characters that they might not be aware of, but that they're carrying with them. And then the secrets being things that maybe their own secrets or secrets that are being kept from them. And those are just like two big categories of tropes that we kept seeing again and again and again. And I think the best stories have those and will allude to, you can allude to those in your blurbs and in your marketing without like laying the whole thing out, especially for something like an unreliable narrator. You don't want to
Yeah, you can't say that.
Yeah, no,
right. Yeah, you don't want to tell somebody that in the beginning that that's your story. So I think those are just really important in that way. And then the other thing I was going to say is like, I think there's certain elements of tropes that there's certain tropes that you're always going to have that make a story better, like ticking time bombs, some kind of element in the story this is why it has to happen now. It has to be solved now. And, that's one of the things that I see people kind of drop the ball on the most, is adding the sense of urgency to their stories, like the why, that why now element. But in the forced proximity, that's really important of, everybody's stuck together. They've got to figure out this condition with this situation with a whole lot of other stuff happening with them. And found family is just something else Sarah and I had discovered. So many of these, you might not think about it for mystery and thriller, but really, especially for series, a lot of times your readers are tuning in again and again, not necessarily for the mystery, but what's going to happen with these characters. Like Sarah told me she gets all kinds of fan mail about the relationship with some of her characters. The readers want to know, when are they going to kiss? When are they going to get together? I was just talking before with Doug about Assassins Anonymous, and that is the theme for that series of Assassins. And so it's really interesting how you can see these same elements again and again used, but in different ways. That was kind of our jam for working together.
I mean, it's interesting. So do you find any that are like way overused tropes or misused tropes that people are using in thrillers and mysteries that are just kind of not hitting the mark?
I think it really depends on, I'm a do not finish a lot on a lot of books. So certainly those things can happen, but it's not necessarily, I feel like, the fault of the trope.
It's not the trope's fault.
The trope would have been fine if you hadn't put it there next to another trope. So
yeah.
I would have been on the New York Times list if it wasn't for that darn trope.
That's right. We can always blame it on the trope, right?
Yeah. It's really like, as Sarah and I found, it's like tropes aren't really used in isolation. Like I said, they really work well with each other, but we also find that you need them with the reader expectations for like what they're expecting out of this genre or subgenre. And then kind of the character's goal, motivation, and conflict. And when you've kind of circled your wagons and you have those three things, like everything's working together, those are really strong stories. Usually stories that, kind of fall a little flat, or you find yourself thinking, did I do that laundry that I was going to do? Where was I with dinner or something? Is because one of those elements kind of hasn't been attended to in the same way. So at least that's my view of it.
I feel like there's certain, I'm more familiar with the cozy mystery, like the amateur sleuth. And there's certain things that are very common in that genre, that subgenre, that readers want to see. But as a reader, I know I am so over some of these things, like the sleuth falls in love with the detective who's investigating the crime. And it's a great setup because, there's lots of tension there. I know why people use it. There's lots of tension. If she's connected to the investigation through him, she can get information. But as a reader, I'm just so done with that. So I think you can use these tropes, but if you can find a slightly new way to do it, or something a little bit different to kind of make it feel fresh, because to a new reader to that genre, they may love it and just, read right through. But to an older or a more established reader that's more familiar with the genre, it may be like, this again. So you kind of have to maybe combine it with some other thing, other trope, situation, keep it fresh,
Gotcha. That's good. So sidestep just a little bit here, because as I'm thinking about this, I'm getting more and more curious. How do you guys figure out what these tropes are? Obviously, you read the books in them, but you've got to start making a list. Do you find yourself reading through a book, especially Jennifer, who's on number 5 now, right? You read through a book and you're like, oh, there's one. And make a note of it.
There's a trope right there.
Yeah.
So,
how do you assemble your list?
Sarah and I are kind of the opinion that you don't need to learn like one set of tropes for mystery, one set of tropes for thrillers. Like there are some specific ones for those, but then there's a lot of tropes that just overlap in general storytelling. So if you're writing romance, or if you're writing, a fantasy novel, there's about like 40 tropes that we figure that that are generally in use. And then, yes, there's certainly, like she mentioned, like red herring and, just like hidden identity things that you're going to see more in ours. But the thing that I think is great about tropes is that the more you look for them, the more you'll see them. And it's really a great way to kind of do critical thinking without like having to be in school and like read this assignment and mark it all up. Your brain just kind of starts to think, oh, how did they put this story together? And, kind of that's, I think, how my brain is wired. And I've been doing this for a bit now. So I kind of tend to see that. But one interesting thing I thought is I've been always very interested in the amnesia trope. And I did not realize when the TV show Severance came out, I did not realize that was about the amnesia trope when they were marketing it, because they never said that. They never used that word. They always used memory. And so I was like, and I'm a huge fan of it, and I've talked about it in lots of articles. If you want, people can find my Substack and read.
It's a great show. It's really good. They need to hurry up with the next season is what they really need to do.
Yes, so, it's very good. But what was really interesting to me was they didn't use that word, but they used that concept of memory and in very interesting ways. But I just thought it was really interesting to hear I'm this person who does all this stuff, and then I'm like totally into it. And all of a sudden, when I was first watching the first season several years ago, I was like, hey, wait a minute. This is the amnesia trope.
Jennifer is really good at spotting these things, and I got a little bit better as we went along, but we each traded, like we divided up the tropes, and we each wrote about different tropes, and then we traded and read each other's stuff. And she was like, oh, look right here, this is a con, and this is a ticking time bomb, which I didn't think of ticking time bomb as being that prevalent in a cozy or an amateur sleuth, but it's there quite often. It's just not the same way. It's not, oh, we've got to save the world by Friday, or it's more like
a kidnapping, anything that's got a timeline on it becomes a ticking time bomb. Yeah,
but it's easy to not see those in genres where you don't expect them. But then, like she said, once you start seeing them, then you see them everywhere. And we were, even now, we'll be watching something and my husband will say, secret baby, that's a secret baby. So he's getting them too.
Yeah. And that was in a horror movie. So it was really
weird. He was watching the news. We were like, whatever.
Yes.
So.
I think it just increases, it makes you a better storyteller, though, if you're aware of the elements, whether you use them or not, in your story. It just is like kind of being aware of more tools in the toolbox.
That was actually what I was just thinking. It's like, I wonder what the ratio is for most writers of what they're consciously putting in there as a trope deliberately, and how many they're putting in there subconsciously. Because I'm thinking about myself now.
I have a different side kind of question. I was thinking the same thing. It's like, how far back do tropes go? Is this something that we've just grown up learning as people as we tell stories? Because kind of what Nick says, I had that same question. So look at us, Nick. We're so smart together.
On the same page, same wavelength. Look at that.
Page, yeah.
Mic drop. We're out. You got it from here.
But yes, that's what I think. Like, we're talking about tropes now in a more conscious way, but movies have been much more conscious of them than, necessarily the book world, right? If we go back and look at their work. But tropes in terms of relationships and like our importance to like how we relate to each other are, the stuff of fairy tales. Like, why those fairy tales persist is they're just packed full of tropes. So yes, I don't think it's like a new thing. I just think it's newer that we're more conscious of it and talking about it. And there'll be a lot of, people will say like, oh, I want to put some tropes in my book, but I don't have them in there. And I was like, well, like, tell me about your story, And then of course they have tons of stuff in there. So just like, okay, you might want to think of which ones you want to pull out when you go to write your synopsis. But whether you're conscious of them or not, it doesn't really matter if you're getting the work done. If you're stuck, it can be helpful to be like, oh, hey, what else could I be doing here to like add more conflict or deepen the characters? And I think tropes can help with that.
I have to say my favorite trope, Nick, is my this is a dumb author trope. So that when people read my books, they're like, oh, this trope.
The dumb author trope.
The dumb author trope, yeah.
Kind of very similar to the dumb cop trope, right?
That's probably.
Somebody has to step in and solve the mystery because the cops are never going to be able to do it. Yeah. So in the book, I wrote about the locked room trope. And the example I used was Edgar Allan Poe's The Murders in the Rue Morgue. And that came out in 1841. And so, so I think they've been around a long time. We just have gotten much better at distinguishing them and using them to talk about books.
The one I always refer to is whenever I get a nice parking right up the front. And I refer to that whenever I do that, like right beside the door, I said, this is Kojak parking. Because, whenever Kojak had to park anywhere, he parked right by the front door every time. So does that count as a trope too? Is that
it's the cars pulling up outside the hospital. They always just pull up and park out front. Yeah, because no one comes running like, move that bloody car out of here. Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of fun little ones like that, I think. Microtropes, maybe. Would that be what you'd call that, Jennifer?
I would say it's more of a vehicle. Like, I wouldn't say it's a trope because I kind of would probably fall on my sword that tropes are relationships, and I wouldn't
see cliche?
That as relationships. I'm sorry?
It's a cliche.
I think it's just a convenience or, a situation or something.
Convention, maybe? It's a convention of the genre, maybe?
A convention. Yeah, convention.
Okay. That might be interesting, yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's a trope because unless there was a way you could somehow work, if you could somehow, like if it was a taxi driver, maybe there would be a way you could work it into like, oh, they were always able to do something like that. But that's kind of, I tend to really feel like that tropes are like, that they're signaling a relationship that the person can automatically like respond to.
So would like breaking the fourth wall be considered a trope, especially in mysteries? Like there's a lot of mysteries where they, the detective might actually talk to the camera or to the reader. I don't know if that falls as a trope or is that a style?
Yeah, it's a style and it definitely sets a tone in the voice, but I wouldn't say it's a trope. But, there's definitely stuff you can do with it. If you were going to like pair it with the unreliable narrator, then there's like hidden identity elements that you could do with that. But yeah, I tend to just think of tropes as like I said, relationships or like building block elements. Unreliable narrators talking to you, certainly that can be an element of that.
Yeah, and you could play off that with the third, breaking the wall, because you feel like when characters do that, you feel like you're getting like this inside story and you're getting the truth, but maybe not if it's unreliable.
It's much easier to get away with that in comedy than it is with anything serious. Yeah, if you do that in something serious, it's like immediately just makes it almost comedic,
Well, there could be but I think there's a few noir books. Can't say. I was going to say where they do that because it does kind of it's just a convention of it. But I think it's more of a relationship with the reader. Yeah, narrative.
So I have a question. So I feel like it's important to have the right tropes in your book. It's even more important not to have the wrong trope in there. Is that something that you've taken a look at? Because, the one wrong trope in the book, and all of a sudden, it's like, what genre is it supposed to be, right?
Yes. I think it depends. Like, again, it goes back to, like, it's not necessarily that one wrong trope is going to torpedo your story, because the thing with tropes is that we use them to different strengths, right? We don't just have like 3 tropes and, they're like in our face all the time. We'll have like some tropes that maybe you don't meet until like halfway through the book that'll maybe talk about the backstory of your character. Or maybe there's some tropes that are involving like the secondary characters or sidekicks. So there's the kind of neat thing about them is you can use them to kind of like different strengths, like, in the sense of like they can be diluted or more concentrated. I think probably adding, sometimes the ticking time bomb trope can feel very artificially enforced in a story where they're just like, okay, they've just tried to come up with this way to add an immediacy that it doesn't really matter. And kind of, I think that circles back to goal, motivation, and conflict, because I just have like so much more respect for character motivation in what all these stories that Sarah and I have looked at, because it's really like, oh, everything is really about what is making your character do what they're doing, and, you're figuring out the goal, which a lot of times I say is like, you really just want to have a very tangible goal. Like in romance, I say it really doesn't work if you're writing a romance to say, oh, I want to be in love with the character, because you can't really measure that. Where the great thing about mystery and thriller is you can find the killer or not. You can stop the bomb from exploding or not. At the end of the story, you can see whether the character was successful or not. In romance, you need to like work on have these other tangible story elements to help you figure out if they're in love and if it's going to be a happily ever after. So that's kind of, I think, the biggest thing is like trying to like balance what your character that's the best way, I think, is like figuring out what your character motivation is, and then you're weaving that in with the tropes.
So then that actually leads to my next question, which is something you kind of touched on a minute ago. So I was going to ask this, but how do we use tropes to help with plotting versus the character development? What are some good ways to make sure that we're implementing them properly or taking advantage of what they offer?
Well, I feel like a lot of the tropes almost have a built-in story with them. Like the orphan, you're going to have somebody who's on their own, and if it's a story about an orphan or a loner, they're probably, going to meet people, make connections, and then in the end, either those are going to be good connections and it's a solid relationship, or those are broken, and then, it's a comedy or a tragedy, whichever way you take it, right? So I feel like a lot of the tropes give us a built-in plot. Amnesia is like that too, because they have to get to that point where they have to confront what they had forgotten and make choices. So I think they could help you with plotting. And as far as character, they do give you a base, I think, for a character. Like if you have an orphan, you're probably going to have some issues that they're dealing with, like maybe abandonment, or I can't think of any other issues right now. I'm sure Jennifer could, but just some stuff like that. So you have things, but then I think you want to deepen that. I don't think you just want to keep it at the surface, right?
Right. No, that makes sense. So you want to be able to, that gives you an opportunity to delve into, like you say, the character themselves. If they're an orphan, then what are they dealing with? What are their expectations? So.
And I think Orphan is a great one because, like Sarah said, there's there's going to be a whole found family journey for that character, and then you're going to be interacting with so many other characters, and so then it's like all the various like scars and traumas that have happened to that person while they're an orphan. So there's really like I said, it's almost like tropes kind of stick together. They stack with each other of thinking of like, well, where do they come from? What's their family? What's their education? What's their, economic status? Who are they? And there's a lot of different ways that tropes can like give you some clues about that. And then like Sarah said, also like propel you some ways to have plot things like a love triangle. Like there's a lot of, did you guys ever see Justified?
Oh yeah. Heck yes.
Oh yeah.
Loved it.
But, that kind of starts out as a bit of a love triangle, right? With the two guys are both interested in the same former, high school prom queen, kind of girl. And so there's like, that has like a bit of a love triangle, even just as they started out that story. So you can find them but that wasn't like the arc of the whole series, right? That was just like something to create conflict in the beginning. So I think that's one of my favorite series. I just love it so much. If, a thriller writer, please go watch Justified.
I think it's the best dialogue on TV, in my opinion. It's some of the best dialogue that I've ever seen.
And the bromance of those two guys is just so good.
Man, that's the way I feel about Nick here. If you were Walton Goggins, I wouldn't shoot you. I'd probably let you go. Yeah.
Did you guys dug coal together?
I think digging coal and writing is very similar anyway. So.
Yeah, feels like you're on your own down the end of a shaft.
Exactly.
I've been shafted by a manuscript before, so might as well.
Okay, so during your intense studying of tropes across time, have you seen a relationship between reader expectations and tropes evolving? Because it seems to me that would probably go hand in hand. It's a little chicken and egg, right? I mean, and it's also true of subgenres when they start taking off in a direction. It's often because, there's a breakout book that kind of finds, and, romantasy happened because somebody wrote something and it actually sold really well and then it ballooned into something huge, right? So they're at the ground level of taking a group of tropes, adding a couple to it. So talk about that a little bit.
I would definitely say domestic thrillers is a subgenre that's just completely exploded. And if you aren't familiar with it, you probably heard of a little book called The Housemaid.
I hadn't heard of that. No, I hadn't heard of that one.
So, who wrote that? Some upstart.
It's like all around. That book, I really feel it's not probably the first book of that kind, but it is for sure the most successful in terms of bringing this genre, a domestic thriller that is really about like, okay, instead of having all the dramas basically going on inside the family or the house. So instead of having like a heist or a spy thriller or something like that, where you're dealing with like external forces, you're dealing with a high level of malevolence inside. And that has been super popular. One of the reasons why I think it's so popular is it became popular with romance readers, which is really interesting. So that's a thing that you see where like a subgenre that you see is popular because of reader expectations of like, they want the same idea of like very deep, detailed domestic relationship stories, but you're also putting it in these very kind of high octane situations where there's like element of like gothic, and violence and things like that. So I think that's been really interesting to kind of see that explosion of that subgenre come out. And it's, and now it's like those books are like, they just can't come out fast enough. People who love them are just like reading them constantly.
So that being said, do you have any secret new or emerging tropes in modern thrillers that you want to share with us that we as writers could possibly take advantage of right now?
I know everybody always wants to know what's going to be the next big trope.
Is it going to be vampires because I'm ready, or is it going to be zombies?
Yeah, be ready,
I'm also ready.
Everything circles around. I think I don't have any kind of, secret predictions. Sorry.
Well, I don't need any more than
I do think
interview's over. So.
I do think there are evergreen tropes in terms of like found family is always going to be strong. And one, I had mentioned it before, but like the whole idea of found family used in different ways. So one way we see it is with the older, kind of like the older generation for the murderers in the building, only murderers in the building. There's like now all of a sudden, then there was like one with Ted Danson. That's the same kind of thing. And then there's the Thursday
Murder Club. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're seeing like that is kind of a new like breakout area.
I've got to say though, real quick, like you said for the older people, and I happen to like both of those shows. And so I feel attacked.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Well,
Newsflash, you're old, Doug.
Oh my God.
Well, it's just, I think in contrast to having all the characters be in their 20s and everybody's all like fresh and sparkly with life where you've had a little bit more mileage. The other thing I think we're going to see is, we talked about it a little before, but I feel like the idea of like with the success of Slow Horses, the Assassins Anonymous, I think we're going to start to see other ways that found family is used and like kind of mashing it up with other things of like The Office, of like these kind of dysfunctional group.
Well, workplace is found family. Yeah. Military, I assume like military, like I write a little bit of military thrillers style. So that to me would kind of fall as found family when you have a military unit that gets together. So
absolutely, found family and military go together. Yes.
I'm seeing a lot more mysteries. In the past, mysteries in my genre, amateur sleuth, traditional mystery, had a single protagonist. You would have a sidekick in a single protagonist. And I'm seeing a lot more that are an ensemble cast, like the Thursday Murder Club. It's like these people, the only murderers in the building, you come together and you have all these different personalities and you form a team sort of and it's a found family element to it that you love to see because these people, Department Q has the same thing, right? So like you can take it darker or lighter, match the tone that your genre wants, right?
Good way to add POVs. That found family gives you a whole lot of different people to add to it. So as opposed to the one. So if you could, because we're going to kind of try to wrap it up here real quick. We'll be having y'all on for all day. We could talk about this, I'm sure. But if you guys could give like one piece of advice about using tropes effectively, specifically to like newer and emerging authors, but what would that be? Other than buy the book, because you should guys should go out and buy the Trope Thesaurus. It's in the links in the show.
I think the biggest thing is to not be afraid of them. I feel like people are often like worried about using them. And I think they're there. The reason why they've persisted through time and why we're still talking about them is because they've been around and they're part of our human relationships. So I think to just start looking for them. And I even have mentioned how I see them in TV commercials when I watch a lot of TV during football season. And I'll notice like some commercials land better than others with me. And I've started to realize, it's the ones that are really going for your emotions, that are really hooking into actual things as opposed to just buy this thing and here's some cute little. So I think just to kind of look more deeply into stories that you care about, that you like. And the other little tip for them, I think, is if whatever genre you write in, sometimes it's easier to start looking for tropes in another genre. So if you're a mystery or thriller writer, maybe watch, a fantasy or sci-fi. Sometimes when you're not you kind of have a different perspective, it's easier to start to see things.
Yeah, I would say if you're brand new to this, when you watch a show, enjoy it. When you read a book, enjoy it. And then go back and try and pick out the tropes that you can see. And when you really concentrate it and look on it and look into it, I think you'll probably be able to see more than you expect. And in your own manuscript, you could have somebody else read it and say, here's the tropes I see, which will probably be things that you don't notice. if you don't mind using AI, which I know some people don't want to at all, but you could use it to say, what are the tropes in this book? It will give you a list, and it may be things that you never recognized that are really resonating, So if you can find examples, I think looking for examples is huge, because once you start seeing it, then you can look at how they used it, how they put it into the plot and the structure and the characters, and kind of deconstruct it, once you figure out what you're seeing and what you like about it.
This has been marvelous, ladies. We're going to throw one more question your way. Doug has this magnificent wheel of questions.
The wheel of questions.
And it'll be some intense author-related type question, probably.
Sure will be. I didn't change these out to something non-author related at all. So I like to keep things.
As long as it's not mustaches, we should be okay, right, Sarah?
Yeah. Oh, this is an easy one. Okay, so what was the first movie you went to see, like, by yourself, without your parents, that you remember going to see independently? Nick, you got to think about this too. What was the first? I know mine. I remember it as soon as I said it.
What was yours, Doug? Because the ladies are thinking here.
Actually, and mine is easy because I just went to the Alamo the other day, and they had Pee Wee Herman's bicycle there. And I remember going to see Pee Wee's Big Adventure with a friend of mine in like 1984, 85, whenever that came out.
That was not the link I thought you were going with when you said I went to the Alamo. How you got from the Alamo to Pee Wee frickin' Herman?
First of all, because Pee Wee's bike was stolen and stored in the basement at the Alamo. And so that was the whole thing. If there is no basement in the Alamo.
He's that old? He was?
Yes.
He fought to defend the Alamo? Pee Wee Herman?
The Alamo's still there. It didn't have. You could put something there right now if you wanted to.
I'm not strong on my American history, but I'm pretty sure Pee Wee Herman didn't get an arrow through his hat.
Oh, see, that's what happens when we let Brits come over here and try to tell us what's going on. So
you're doing so well on your own. All right, Jen, what do you remember?
Thinking it was probably one of what I know is the original Star Wars. But now young people probably don't know them in that way. But I think it was probably The Empire Strikes Back would be the one I think.
Good one.
Okay,
too. Excellent.
Solid. Yeah. We just rewatched all the Star Wars movies, chronological order. Right?
Did you add Rogue One? Rogue One's the best. So
yeah, it was in there. So. We watched all through. We didn't watch the animated ones and those extras, but we watched them all through. What's bizarre is because they go backwards, right? So you're watching these modern made ones, and then it jumps into the originals, which were fantastic in their time, but they're pretty campy now. But it's still great. Yeah. All right, Sarah, what you got?
I do remember going to see the early Star Wars movie, like the very first one when it first came out of the originals. But that was with my uncle, who was a huge sci-fi fan, took my brother and I. So I guess that doesn't count for going alone. So I think maybe it was Clue, the original Clue.
Very cool.
I may have gone with a friend, but I do remember that.
That's a great movie too. Such a awesome.
And it's very campy too, right?
And the scenes were born of your mystery career there.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I have
Tim Curry.
But mostly with
Tim Curry is brilliant in there. It was. So, Friends would count as long as you were not with parents. Like it was the first time you get to go by yourself. Yeah. So, all right, Nick, what was yours?
Mine was the movie of the book Swallows and Amazons, which was kind of a teenager book, and I can't remember who wrote it now, but they're famous in England, and it was a great fun book. And we had a little cinema in Buckingham, where I grew up at the time, that had one screen. It was like whatever is showing in that one screen at a time. So we rode our bikes into town and went and saw that on a Saturday afternoon. I think that's the first one I remember going to with just a couple of mates and not with my parents. Yeah, unsupervised, so we could throw popcorn and stuff around.
It's always fun to remember like what you kind of think like that, because it just pops up. So
yeah, and they had intermissions back then and all that stuff. That's how old I am. That's how old. This was brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on. It's we'll put in the show notes the link to the book. Everyone should go grab them. There's 5 in the series. So if you thriller and mystery one, but there's lots more. We got a horror one and a general one at the beginning, I think. So something for everybody. So thank you, ladies. We really appreciate it. Great show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, thank you, Sarah and Jennifer, for popping in and making us feel a whole lot less smarter. Maybe we feel smarter now because we know more. So maybe we feel smarter. Never mind.
I rarely feel smart.
Oh, no. That is a lot of information. It's really good information too, because I think it's the kind of thing. Tropes are I think they're the things we know about, but we don't know about. It's like breathing. Like, we understand that we're breathing. We don't think about it. We do the same thing with telling stories. But understanding a little bit more about how a trope works and where it should work, and then also how to make it, to use it and mix it a little bit better. And we've talked about this with both of our books. I know my first book, it's supposed to be a mystery, and I know there's tropes all over the place in that one. So it probably would have helped a whole lot more if I'd have come in with it with an idea. This is the tropes I want. This is the tropes people like. Again, right now is a good time to do this. Anything that's got the house-made domestic thriller trope to it.
Well, I think that boat may have sailed. Actually, I think the market's
already out the door.
Yeah. I think
the trope is I missed it. So
yeah. I think the interesting thing is that some genres and subgenres, the authors are really cued in on the things they need to hit right now. And romance authors, I'm looking at you. I think they have this down, really down, and are more conscious of it, perhaps. And I don't know if it's become it because the word itself has been it had a taint to it over time, which it shouldn't have, and certainly today it absolutely should not have. But I think that maybe it has affected some people. But I think it's like all these things. Like you said, it's a kind of subconscious, automatic kind of thing you're putting in, right? It's part of your flow, part of your, especially in a series, there's certain things you're going to try and hit. But I think being more, I come out of this conversation with thinking I need to be a little bit more conscious of some of the smaller tropes that do resonate. We're all doing we're all doing the ticking clock thing. We write thrillers and mysteries. So there's a ticking clock. There's always got to be a ticking clock in some way, shape or form. And a ticking clock can be, it can be a spaceship in, not in a thriller. Well, it can be a thriller, but not in my thrillers. But there's a spaceship and it's got 100 years and they're in cryo, but they woke up. It's like all of a sudden there's a time thing now, right? That they're awake. Therefore, they're going to be dead before they reach the destination to save the world.
Look at your A.J. Bailey series. You're underwater. You have a ticking clock time already. It's that little needle that shows how much air you have. So right there is also.
Oh, it definitely gets used where, they're running out of air.
It's anything. It could be a kidnapping. We've got to find this child in the next 24 hours. We have a deadline. And you can do that. I mean, let's be honest. You can have a ticking time clock in a romance if it's got the right, hey, I'm only in town for the weekend, and that's when you got to squeeze that romance in before I leave forever, kind of a thing. There's all sorts of ways to use these tropes, and I think the fact that so many of them are universal between genres, like we don't think about that. While you may not be able to do some of the heavy romance things in a thriller, but the generic things like the ticking clock, that suspense that you build in that, it still shows up in other things as well. So
yeah, they were saying there's like 40 tropes that are common to fiction books, basically. And I think I've definitely made mistakes with it in the past. My A.J. Bailey series that you mentioned is, I've got 18 books, 19 with one on pre-orders. So there's a lot of stories in there, and I do a lot of dual timeline. And I think I have, and I'm thinking one in particular in there that I probably steered away from the group of tropes a little bit, or added one that perhaps confuses some of the readers a little bit on that series. And so I definitely didn't have it in my, I just wrote what I wanted to write within the A.J. Bailey world at that time. And then looking back, it's like, I love that book actually. And it's where Nora Summer gets introduced into A.J. Bailey's stories, which ended up being a whole spin-off series. So it's great from that point of view, but I definitely think it's a hitch point in the series. Some people skip over it, or some people probably leave the series at that point, although the read-through afterwards is still pretty strong. So
yeah, I think there's things to think about when you're doing that. If you really want to examine your books, and I like she said, if you're AI friendly, then you could probably drop your book into ChatGPT or one of whatever AI and ask it what tropes you're presenting, because you may not be aware of some of the tropes that are even we're just using conventions that we like. They happen to be good tropes. So that's part of that. We're such a storytelling kind of people that it's just ingrained in us. So
and you know what you should do, people? Get that book. There's a book they wrote about it that can help you with it. So
it's for sure, absolutely. The book is great as far as that. It's I've got the Trope Thesaurus, and I will probably be picking up the mystery thriller one because it can't hurt to be a little more in tune with what I'm doing. It's valuable. We should have a book club.
Cool. All right. Well, big thanks to everybody for listening in. Thanks for listening to the show. Thank you so much to our Patreon subscribers. If you're not over there, jump over to Patreon and sign up. Sign up on the free level.
Yeah,
as we teased at the beginning. Yeah, there's some cool stuff coming. So be over there, have a presence, and you'll see what it is when it shows up.
You might get some pictures of me and Nick. Might not. Depends on what you feel like.
Or if you pay money, we won't
send you pictures of
me. Hey, thanks to Vellum, the wonderful formatting software. We love the Brads. Indeed, we love the Brads.
The bestest formatting software.
I believe we've established that they are the bestest. In fact, they're going to tagline the bestest. They're going to put that in their new ads. You'll see that soon coming up, folks. And you heard it here first. Vellum, the bestest. Go to tryvellum.com/the two authors and find out more. Everything will be in the show notes. Thanks to Sarah and Jen. And until next time, be cool to each other.
Fair winds and following seas.
You've been listening to the Two Authors Podcast with Nicholas Harvey and Douglas Pratt. Subscribe on your favorite platform for new shows coming every week.